Hello, sir.
Hi,
We welcome you today here.
thank you.
We thank you for accepting our invitation for the conference and for this discussion, informal discussion. So, I have a list of questions prepared for you.
Okay.
I have categorized it as questions on modernity in the backdrop of the Modernities Redefined conference, some questions on your research on traditional theatre in Kerala, and some questions on academia, your experience as an academician and administrator and as a teacher. So, shall we begin
Yeah,
with some
shoot.
questions?
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, sir. So, sir, how, in your opinion, has modernity evolved in South Asia, considering the region's rich history and diverse cultural heritage?
See, as I mentioned in my lecture, the introduction to the idea of modernity in South Asia, especially India, has come from the experience of colonial modernity or colonialism and imperialism. The introduction of English education, the introduction of industrial modes of production, different aspects of Western life and Western epistemology being brought into Kerala and into India in general. Sorry, when I speak of Kerala because I come from Kerala, but it applies to almost all the provinces of India. That is where the idea of being modern as something different from what you have been till now, till that point of time, being immersed in what one would call a traditional kind of life. That idea of being modern was inaugurated through colonialism. And so we had Western modes of education coming in. We had serious kinds of questions being asked about traditional value systems, about belief systems. You may remember the movement against sati or movements against superstitions, etc., that took place in various parts of India. All these were under the influences of colonial powers, of colonial education, colonial cultural implications. At the same time, we also find that with the advent of English and the familiarity with Western literature, within the province of literature too, there was an attempt to bring in new forms. For example, the novel. The novel was never there till the idea of the novel was introduced. Or romantic poetry, for instance. Again, that was under the influence of English or German romantic poetry. So essentially, our experience of modernity, or our inaugural experience, initial experience of modernity, was under the auspices of the colonial system, and as a result or as a consequence of that. Now, the problem with that is primarily that it creates a certain kind of tributary system, in the sense that there is a center for the world and the others are peripheries. So the world has the West as a center, who determines how the world should be, and the rest are ones which follow them and try to reach up to the same level as the West is. Now, in the work of Frantz Fanon and others, especially in the case of Africa, we have seen this idea getting enunciated in different ways, where Africa was seen as a barbaric land, a land of uncivilized people. And India, on the other hand, was seen as the burden of the white man. So it was a burden of the white man to civilize us, uncivilized, barbaric people, and bring us up to the same level as the civilization of the West. And this kind of a superior-inferior connection, this kind of a, greater-lower kind of connection, a hierarchical connection, which was intrinsically part of the whole colonial ideology. That was their mode of self-justification for what they were actually doing. Even while the reality was the exploitation of these colonized lands and the taking away of the resources from these places and the power over these lands, the actual administrative and political power over these lands, the whole thing was presented to themselves, their self-consciousness, and to the natives too, was that this was a civilizing mission. And as a civilizing mission, the fruits of enlightenment, the fruits of modernity, the fruits of Renaissance were being generously given us so that we can also slowly become modern. And that earlier notion of colonial modernity, no doubt, it has created a lot of changes within our society. It's about our process of democratization. Our freedom struggle itself has drawn from the ideas given by colonialism. The idea of the individual, the idea of democracy, the idea of secularism, etc. They were all drawn from the colonial or the Western system of philosophy, etc. But at some point, this is history which everyone knows, but at some point, every society will need to ask this question. And that is what we also started asking. Fine, we have received this and we have changed. But does this mean that had there been no colonialism, we would never have been modern? Or does it mean that given our traditions, given our history, given our long-standing culture of literature and performance and writing and all that, we wouldn't have found a way of changing ourselves? Wouldn't we have done that? That's a question that vexed a lot of people, not just in India, but most of the colonized lands. Now, one interesting thing about this is, at the time of colonialism, one of the major aspects of resistance to colonialism, especially in Africa, in Malaysia, in India, when the natives were being told that you're not good for anything, that you don't have a civilization. So a poet like Muhammad bin Haji Saleh from Malaysia writes, "Do not say," a poem called "Do Not Say." He says, "Do not say because you do not know. What do you know about us? Have you listened to the Bang Suagan? Have you seen the Songket? These are all cultural artifacts of Malaysia. Have you listened to the shires? Have you gone to the villages to listen to their community music?" Now, these are our culture, and this has been there for long. You never know about this, and it's because you don't know about this that you say we are not civilized. So, part of this resistance to colonialism was also this attempt to go back to one's roots, to one's own past, one's own history, to rediscover within that elements of culture, elements of elemental civilization, elements of what one shall say, change and transformation, so that this could be used as a fuel for the resistance against modernity. I'm saying this because almost in a continuation of that, this question does come up. Can't we be modern by ourselves? Have there been some instances or many instances of such efforts at modernity where the impulse for change has come from within, not from without, and where the impulse of change has been prompted by local conditions, local issues? For example, what about the resistances against the caste system that has come up in many parts of India? Savitri Phule, for example, Narayanan in Kerala, all these instances, most of these leaders of the struggle against the caste system were not Western educated. Narayanan did not know English. He followed Sankaracharya's Advaita, but he changed it in a certain way. When Sankaracharya thought about the non-distinction or non-duality between the self and the cosmos, Aham and Brahma, Narayanan brought it down to the earth and said that there is no distinction between me and the other, Aham and Param, me and the other, there is no distinction. And if there is no distinction, how can there be a caste system? So you understand. So there, what you find is that the the compulsion for change seems to come from within. And it is also energized by ideas, by motives that are our own, not something that we borrowed from the West. So that is where a curious turn takes place. And that is where attempts to look at our own modernities, and where the singular notion of a global modernity, propelled by the central vision that is there in the West, is rejected, and you start to look at modernity as a diverse phenomenon, or a series of phenomena that takes place at different places at different times, occasioned by the actual experience of the people there. So I would say that, I was speaking more of the discourse of modernity. So what has happened of late, what we find is that colonial modernity at the same time has been looked at critically, because it has been hand in glove with structures of oppression, or with structures of slavery, or with structures of exploitation. Now, if that is a modernity that colonialism has brought in, have we had other structures of modernity? And there have been several attempts at looking at that. Bengal modernity, not the earlier notions of Bengali modernity, but the way in which the later work have looked at the rise of different forms of literatures, of the writings of, or the expressions of people till then denied the possibility of expression in terms of the caste or the structures of society. So that is the move. And I think this conference has actually, is trying to touch that, shall I say, shift, or that move which is taking place right now. We're in the middle of that.
Yeah. So I think you talk about organic change when you talk about Narayan Guru from within. And you said, do not say it because you do not know Muhammad bin Haji. That leads me to believe that organic change can come only when you know yourself, your tradition, and your history. Am I right, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. See, when you use the word organic change, I'm a bit skeptical.
Okay.
Because organic almost sounds as if there should be no extraneous influences. If you look at India, we find that we have always received influences from outside, and we have also given to other people. We have had the Chinese coming in, we have had the Arabs coming in, we have had the Greeks coming in, and the idea of something that is entirely pure as that which is Indian alone does not stand the scrutiny of history. That doesn't happen. But the more important thing here is, when you speak of organicity, I would place it as something which is engendered by the experience of that community itself, rather than the importation of certain ideas that are the result of the experience of another community. What I'm trying to say is, for example, a certain scheme of change may take place in a society which results in a certain form of literature or a certain style of literature rising up. But there's another way too. You can find an example or a model in another literature, the literature of another language, and you can use that model to import this here. These are two types of change. If you look at the first as an organic one which has come up in response to one's own experience, so to speak, and as you said, one's own history and one's own past, but more importantly, one's own present, there it becomes much more vital, much more genuine, in the sense that it is not trying to size up to the expectations of something else, or size up to the measuring scale provided to us by someone else, but where we are addressing our own concrete situations in whatever way we can. So yes, organic in that fashion, but not in the fashion of rejecting everything that comes from outside. Every society, every community is a mongrel community. Everything is a mixture. There is no purity if you think of organicity in that manner.
And I'll go back to the same two lines from the poet. Somehow it seems to stick with me. Do not say because you do not know. And he's speaking to the colonizer. The question that vexes me is, do we know? And I remember during the pre-lunch discussion, Professor Acharya and Professor Savita Singh, they also talked about these forgotten volumes of many authors, which we have just, which we have not taken a look at. And what I'm trying to ask is, are we putting enough efforts to
Understand
our own narratives from the past? As you said, lots have been written, and
see, let me put it this way: there are two kinds of knowledge. One is an implicit knowledge. The other is manifest knowledge. Now, I don't have to read the Ramayana.
yeah,
I may have never read the Ramayana, but I know the Ramayana
yeah,
because I've grown up with the Ramayana. My grandmother has told me stories from the Ramayana. I've heard snatches here and there, or the Mahabharata. Or these stories, they're part of me. Maybe I'm not even aware that I know that. But come a particular occasion, and you find an analogy, and suddenly this comes up inside you and say, there is a parallel there in the Mahabharata. Did I know that I knew that before I said that? Probably not. It is an occasion which calls from within you that implicit knowledge, which is turned into a manifest knowledge. So when you say, do we know ourselves? We do know ourselves, but do we consciously know ourselves? That's a different question. Do we consciously know ourselves in order that we can situate ourselves and the past in terms of the present? This kind of a dialectic, this dialogue between the past and the present. For us to do that, we need to have a conscious understanding of the past, a conscious understanding of literatures, of writings, of traditions, of oral cultures, etc. We need to have a conscious understanding of the past. And that is what, to a great extent, the discipline of history is trying to do. Now, is it complete? It can never be complete. It never is complete in that sense. And in our case, what you say is right. There has been a rupture brought about by colonialism. And that rupture has created what I would call a lacunae, where knowledge of the self has taken a back position, has been pushed backward, and knowledge of things which are considered more important today in the contemporary world, in terms of careers, in terms of economic prosperity, in terms of a global requirement, etc., we have moved towards that at the cost of knowing our own selves. Now, there is an issue here. We need to know that. Without knowing that, we stand to lose a tremendous lot that we should actually be using. If I may give an example here, which I've been trying to tell the teachers and students of my own university, the system of pedagogy in Sanskrit, it's a very simple system. System of pedagogy in Sanskrit it's called the Khandanvaya Paddhati, where, because it's an inflected language, you have the subject, verb, and the object. You can put it around in any way, unlike English, where there is a specific word order. So how do you understand what that sentence means? Using the inflections, the word endings, you have to discover what the verb is. And once you've discovered the verb, you start asking questions to the verb. So, suppose the verb is, you are interviewing me. So, interviewing is a verb. So, once that verb is found, I ask a question. Who is interviewing? And you will have to find that nominative case. In the noun, there will be no word ending. So that will be the nominative case, the namapada. And that becomes the subject. But then me, that is also a nominative case. Sometimes in the sense that it is an object. So step by step, by asking questions to the verb or to the sentence, you bring out the grammatical categories and you bring out the meaning. So I say, so for example, Rama fought Ravana. All right. Who fought Ravana? Rama. What kind of Rama? Then the adjectives which are there, Ayodhyapati or Kulina or handsome, all these goes there. Now you may ask, why can't handsome go with Ravana? That is where the word ending has to be carefully construed to make sure which word goes where. Now, why I'm saying this is that is a very, very fundamentally critical method. It's a dialogic method, it's a dialectic method where you're not being taught, you're learning it. You're taught the skill how to construe a sentence. And once you've learned that skill, you go from step to step, from simple to complex sentences, from lighter kavyas to more dense shastras, throughout maintaining this question-answer method, what Amartya Sen calls the argumentative method, this debating method. We have lost that. Even in Sanskrit today, they do not use the system. What they do, only in the very traditional schools do they use that system. But if that is learned properly, that is a system that can be of immense help to modern disciplines. Think about that particular question-answer method, that critical method being, it's a hermeneutical method, if I may put it that way. Think of it being brought into English, or into sociology, or into political science, where you move away from blanket postulations to a dialogic method. This is a kind of knowledge that we need to recover. But as a caveat, let me also add, knowing the past does not mean celebrating the past.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference between the two. What we are right now engaged in is an ignorant celebration of the past and myth-making about the past, almost verging on the propagation of falsehoods. That is not going to serve anyone properly. That's definitely not going to serve knowledge at all. It may serve some political or power purposes, but other than that, it's not going to serve any knowledge purposes. So yes, a conscious, critical knowledge of our own past is absolutely essential, is very required.
It's a very interesting pedagogical method that you
Yes.
talk of, actually. So through learning sentence construction, one is learning critical abilities.
And it is continued till the end. So what you find is that this method of question and answer, it is adopted at the beginning, and these questions and answers acquire more and more complexity as you go forward. And that is a method that you use even towards the end, where if you have a Vakyartha Sadas, or if you have a debate, a philosophical debate, look at most of the treatises in Sanskrit. You present a Purva Bhaksha. The Purva Bhaksha is that which has gone before. And you have to know that which has gone before, that which has been said by earlier scholars. You need to know that really well. And you present it in the most fair manner possible. You become its advocate when you're presenting it. And once it is presented, you start asking questions of that. And you start countering that. And if possible, you defeat that position and bring forward your position. Does this make sense? This is a way. So this question answer thing, this debating dialogic method, you find entirely at all levels, which unfortunately we I think have largely lost.
Did you use the word Vakyartha?
Yeah.
Again, I can't stop but ask you, why are we not doing it? Bringing it back, adopting it?
We are doing Vakyartha, but what we are doing with Vakyartha today is a mechanical kind of thing. We take a predetermined text and we go through the motions of doing that. But the real Vakyartha system was designed as part of a community of scholars, where a text is being read, say by one scholar, and he or she finds it difficult to understand a particular phrase. So it is taken to this community of scholars, where they debate on it. Finally, where they can reach a consensus about what the best meaning, not the correct meaning, the best meaning or the best sense of that could be. They reach a consensus. But that consensus can be changed later, because another community of scholars may sit together and think of another possibility. So this is the whole Vakyartha system is a method of not just arriving at what is the best explanation of something, it is also an attempt to pass that on to other people, and where knowledge becomes not an individual pursuit, but a community pursuit. It's a shared kind of knowledge.
As a traditional form, has it adopted to modern, let's say modern technological advances? Does it need to adapt? Because as we talked about, it has its own identity. But what have you seen in Kerala, back in Kerala? Or other traditional forms?
Yeah. See, we work with a received binary of the traditional and the contemporary.
Yeah.
No, I'm not criticizing you. It's good that you asked that question. It's not as if you are an adherent of that, but there is this received binary of the traditional and the contemporary, where we expect the contemporary to be changing, to be transforming, to be alert to what is going on in the present, and the traditional as something that is there, rigid, static, ossified.
Yes.
That never happens.
Which is not the case.
That just cannot happen.
Yeah.
If that happens, then you don't call it traditional, you call it dead.
Right.
There are a lot of forms, performance or different kinds of forms, which do not continue today. They're just vestiges of the past. You're not even vestiges, they've died and gone away. They're not here anymore. But those forms which we call traditional today, they are traditional in the sense that they have a longer history. And having a longer history, they still continue in the present. I always ask this question whenever such discussions are there. I say a traditional performer, Kutiyattam, Kathakali, or Mohiniyattam performer, they're expressing traditional forms. But they still happen to live in the same day as we do. They eat the same rice as we do. They go on the same buses or cars or flights as we do. They read the same newspapers. So the artists or the proponents of the traditional forms are very contemporary. And they are just our contemporaries. And it is inevitable that there will be, inscriptions of the present or the changing present on these forms. Now, when you ask me, has Kutiyattam changed? I will say, yes, Kutiyattam has changed, and that is why it is still surviving. Had it not changed, we wouldn't be talking about Kutiyattam today. Kutiyattam had a very cloistered kind of history from, say, the 15th century onwards till the mid 20th century, when it could be performed only in the temples, the huge temple theatres. It had a very limited audience of caste Hindus, very upper caste Hindus, and only primarily those who knew Sanskrit. These were the times when Sanskrit was also being taught in the temples as part of the Othambalam. So these were parallel institutions. So you learn Sanskrit there, you come and watch Kutiyattam here. There's a continuity there. Interestingly, Kutiyattam follows the same question answer method in enactment.
Yes.
So this parallel connection is there. But what happened towards from the 20th, beginnings of the 20th century is, again, modernity. The temple establishments started losing. There used to be huge economic power centers. They had huge lands under their authority. They were economic houses basically. All that started to be dismantled. Excuse me. All that started to be dismantled. And Kutiyattam could not be sustained anymore by the temples per se. And so there was a period of attenuation, a period of reduction, when temple by temple by temple, Kutiyattam started getting stopped, and only a few temples were actually continuing with that. That was when I should call the legendary reformer of Kutiyattam, Paingulam Ramacharya, decided to bring it out of the temples and to perform it in public venues. That was not just a heroic step, that was much more than a heroic step. It was like, it's a huge risk. And he was people made all kinds of abusive remarks about him. He was considered an opponent to the whole Brahminical system. He was trashed. But he went ahead and did that because he said that's the only way that Kutiyattam can survive. Now we have performances within the temple as well as outside the temple. But what bringing Kutiyattam out of the temples occasioned was that a new set of people started watching Kutiyattam. And these artists came to be associated or related or in conversation with a new set of audience. Inevitably, it created changes within that. And Kutiyattam had to be taken outside. And when Kutiyattam had to be taken outside India, or when it had to be performed in public venues, the long drawn out old method of performance couldn't be continued anymore. So they had to find a way out to cut it down to 1.5, 2 hours. And Kutiyattam gave the answer, because Kutiyattam has an episodic structure. A play like Ascharya Chudamani, if you were to perform it in its entirety, it'll take nearly a year to complete. So you take pieces from it, highlights, and present it. So that's what's happening right now. As with any other traditional form, Kathakali, Odissi, Kathak, or Mohiniyattam, any of these traditional forms, they are changing, they are developing. There is continuity. There is still elements of past practice inside that. There is also within the pedagogy and within the form itself and the culturing of the body, there are certain elements which are maintained as part of the aesthetic of the form. But they change. They have to change.
So what we must understand is art forms like culture and our identities are always evolving.
Constantly in flux. Suppose we don't change. When I'm asking a silly question, suppose we don't change at all. Will it be possible for us to, you move from one place to another. You need to adapt. You need change from one time to, I was a person who did not own a mobile phone. Who resisted using a mobile phone, cell phone. And then suddenly there was this rather difficult time when a relative of mine had to be hospitalized. And then I had to be there, and I needed a mobile phone to get in touch with people and my family. So I bought a mobile phone. And look, now I can't exist without a cell phone. None of us can. So we have adapted to that. In fact, our entire life has changed even without us knowing about that. Imperceptibly, it has changed where we do not own the mobile phone anymore. The mobile phones own us. That's what has happened.
You talked about the composition of the audience and evolving in traditional art forms. Interestingly, my next question was that only, like, how has the composition of the audience changed? Can you speak?
In the case of Kutiyattam especially, I would say that what used to happen earlier was only people with the right of access into the temples could go in. And into the Kuttambalam, only who could sit up there, are where the Brahmins and the temple-related castes. And the third thing is you need a knowledge of Sanskrit.
To understand.
And so anyone who does not have a knowledge of Sanskrit will naturally not have any interest in going there. So it was a very small community of people belonging to the topmost castes and primarily men. Women never used to go to the Kudambilam. So primarily men and that too of the top, the upper castes were the audience. But when it was taken out, what is most interesting is that when it was taken out, that was when it came to be discovered by people, especially theater people, people of the theater, people of performance, people in dance, that this is an absolutely marvelous site of so many rich performance conventions, rich performance techniques. There is an unbelievable, shall we say, transparency to it. Kutiyattam never claims to be reality. Kutiyattam always knows that it is performance, and it makes it clear it is performance. That freedom, one character, one actor who's this character, plays this character, can easily change his role and become another character. Ravana can become subtly Shurpanaga, just a change of clothes, change of the arrangement of the costume, and then he can become Shurpanaga and become very Shurpanaga-like. So that freedom, or shall I say, flexibility inside the Kutiyattam theatre came to appeal first to a lot of people in theatre, scholars, practitioners, and that is when contemporary theatre started taking a huge interest in Kutiyattam, and Kutiyattam artists were brought to contemporary theatre schools to train students. And then, of course, there was a larger audience. I wouldn't still call it a big audience. It's still a small audience because it's not easy. You need a long gestation period of learning to actually get to know that. But now there is some kind of a steady audience. I would even go to the extent of calling it largely secular audience, people belonging to different communities, and a lot of Western and non-Indian scholars coming to watch it. It's changed. And there are corresponding changes in the systems of performance too. Yeah. And new plays are being brought up, new performances are being created. Usha Mangyar, for instance, who works, this is my colleague at the university, has been very instrumental in, not just instrumental, she has led from the front in creating or recovering old content which had been lost and creating new content for the stage. Very recently, she even played Sita, the pensive Sita, Kumarana Ashan's poem. She did that on stage. So there's a lot of changes taking place.
Are contemporary social issues being portrayed in traditional art forms like gender issues, environmental issues, other societal issues? Have they made their way into the theatres?
Yes. I mentioned Usha Mangyar here. Usha Mangyar did a production of Ahalya, the character in Mahabharata, in the traditional Nangyar Kutu style. Now, I've actually written about that, and so there's been a long interview with her too. And in that production, what she brings to bear upon the myth of Ahalya is a very contemporary woman's perspective. And she doesn't say it. She doesn't shout slogans, or she doesn't do anything. She just takes that story and delivers it in such a way that it is definitely, with absolute clarity, the perspective of a woman. I'll give you two examples of that. Now, in this sequence where Ahalya's life in Gautama's, her husband's, the hermit, the great sage, his hermitage, she's this very young girl. How Usha presents her as like she's a very young girl, and she has her hopes and she has her desires, and she, as a young girl, she has her curiosities. But in the presence of this, hoary old man, who's only given to meditation and that kind of thing, she feels completely out of place and she feels left alone. And this difference between how she behaves with Gautama, with great respect, even fear, and she's completely contained within herself, she's very serious and sober. And then when he is gone, and then she goes out, and then she sees nature, and she sees the flowers, and then she wears a flower in her own hair, and wonders, and she has a pet fawn, baby deer, along with her, and she asks him, "Am I beautiful?" This whole the contradiction on the one hand, and towards the end, the Mahabharata actually says Ramayana actually says, I'm sorry, I said Ahilya from Mahabharata, it's Ahilya from Ramayana. So when Rama finally comes and releases her, according to the Ramayana, she joins Gautama. But in Usha's case, no. The story ends there. The story ends there. Because according to Usha, after being caught within that stone for so long, there is a huge transformation that has taken place inside her. And Gautama is no match for her anymore. She doesn't want to go back. She doesn't even say that. She is alone. And she is Ahalya, the Devi. She has transformed into something much, much greater. So what you find there is no ostensible plain speaking about the present or about the perspectives of the present. But in the actual depiction, there is a huge change that takes place. I think there have been several such attempts, some attempts which are rather mechanical, where, trying to get an environment and gender, import them into this, and where as with any art form, when you bring something in artificially, that can create a problem. But there have also been several instances where that word that you used earlier, when it has become part of the organic, structure of the form, that has happened in Kutiyattam, in Kathakali, especially in Nangyarkutha and Mohiniyattam. In Mohiniyattam, I think there's been a lot of efforts towards that. Some efforts which are not so good, but some efforts which are quite compelling, I should say. I think the major thing to be noted here is that such attempts at change or efforts at change and of bringing on board a contemporary critique have come more from women than from men. Quite predictably so.
Yes.
They've come from women. So that is how it stands. Yeah.
It's very interesting. I wanted some examples actually. Yeah. Okay. I want to ask you some questions on academia, on your experience as a teacher, and on your experience as a teacher. So, as an experienced teacher, we at GSHS Humanities over here at GITM Bengaluru, we are a group of young teachers. So can you tell us some things, some pointers? Can you give us some pointers so that we become better, compassionate teachers to students?
I really don't think there is any, shall I say, perfect rule about how to become a good teacher. Ultimately, it is the commitment that you have to what you're doing and your ability to communicate with your students, not as someone lesser than you, but as participants in a process, as partners in a process that you're going through. So I wouldn't venture to advise about how to teach. Each person will have his own or her own particular method, which has been time tested, and so I wouldn't venture to say that. But there is one thing else I shall definitely say. I think in India, we need to move out of this teaching modality, where the whole classroom teaching method, where the teacher teaches and the student just, leans back and is supposed to learn. Absorbs, consumes. Where it's like a passive system, that has to be done away with. And I'm saying this because today's world requires skill sets, approaches, forms of or possibilities of intervention from the students, which require their active engagement with whatever it is that they're doing. It is not as if you are absorbing a set of pre-existing knowledges, but to acquire a set of skills and approaches through that knowledge so that you can address the problems, the issues that come up before you. A scientist who has learned science cannot just continue with that. He uses that knowledge to go into this lab and to work with further problems. In the same way, we need that kind of an engaged learning. And especially today with technology becoming so diverse and becoming so enabling, I think this is something that we should seriously consider. Come out of our shells and actually employ this, because technology can be very enabling, especially for the student, to do independent work. And that technology is not too expensive or too prohibitive today. Institutions can offer the technology, students can afford that. And that way, to make them directly involved, not just in the reception of knowledge, but in the production of knowledge, where at least in an initial way, they get the experience of how to produce knowledge, which will make them greater producers of knowledge at a later point of time. So I would say that you people should not be taking any advice from people like me, because we have continued with that old method, and I try to tell the younger teachers today, or my faculty members, that it has to change. And one has to open up our classrooms, let the students go and work on their own, enable them to work on their own. That is what is required.
It must begin with the teacher inside the classroom.
Yes.
And then he should adapt to that style of communication.
It should be an open-ended kind of thing. The teacher cannot go into a classroom thinking that she has everything sewn up and this is what I'm going to deliver. And once that is delivered, my job is done. That kind of a thing has to be done away with. And where the area that is to be taught, or the domain that is to be transacted, has to be done in such a way where the students get a possibility of entering into it. And it is this interactive model through which it is transacted. Now that will throw a lot of surprises to the teacher. The teacher cannot predict in advance what's going to happen. Many things may come up. But that is where I say the teacher has to come down from that pedestal and become partners. And once you come down from the pedestal, there's not a problem. The teacher is not a know-all. The teacher is primarily a facilitator for the student to learn. In which case, sometimes the teacher may also become a learner herself.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, sir. So we were talking about liberal education yesterday a lot, and I wanted to ask to you as an administrator, and as an academician, what is your perspective and assessment of the state of so-called liberal education in India right now, and what loopholes do you see in bringing it to the Indian education system? What have you observed, come across, would suggest?
What has remained or what has continued for a long time in Indian education is that our disciplines have remained silos which are not connected with one another. And so it's like a reduplication, a continuation of the same thing year after year. Curricula and syllabi being repeated again and again. But it is no longer possible to continue like that. The world is a much more complex place. And the world is also a much more inter-entangled space. Not just in terms of cultures and geographies, in terms of technologies, in terms of knowledge systems. The clear dividing line between one discipline and the other, which probably could be said to have existed till the 1950s or 60s, are fast dissolving. In many cases, they've completely dissolved. Disciplines themselves have been challenged, are being challenged. So we need to go into a much more assertively multidisciplinary manner, where whether it is the humanities or the social sciences, we need to really redefine, I should say, what are our objectives in actually having this discipline, or having this teaching method, or having this program. And whatever is required to actually achieve that objective should be brought into it. So what I'm trying to say is, for example, a program in history. Now, what are the objectives of this? The objectives of this may involve a real understanding of, say, the methods of bronze making of a certain period of Indian history. Now, that may require the student to be taken to an actual bronze making system, and how that is done, to see the intricacies and the sophistication of the method that was used, say, during one of the past ages. That cannot be given by a history teacher. That has to be given that knowledge has to be provided by a bronze maker, a person who is a metallurgist, probably. So how do we bring that in, factor that in? When we think that, oh, that's the metallurgist's job, we don't need that for history. All we need to say is that we had very sophisticated methods of metallurgy during X period or Y period. That's all a historian's job. No. You need to know how that was sophisticated, how that was different. So that kind of merging of disciplines, merging of knowledge systems, where you need to think outside of the skins of the disciplines so that other disciplines can come in, or that kind of a thing is absolutely required. So I think when you mentioned liberal education, one way of looking at it is to think of the old liberal arts method, where you have the art subjects deployed in a certain manner. I'm not thinking of that at all. Okay. I'm thinking of a liberal education system, in the sense of it providing maximum opportunity for the student to have very focused knowledge in an area where inputs from several disciplines can come together, but he'll become an expert in that area. Okay. Or it is possible for a student who is multi-talented, multi-interested, to be at one and the same time learn, say, sociology, but also train in music, hoping that at some point of time there may be a coming together of sociology and music, creating new avenues of research and thinking about our own practices. So that is what I understand by liberal. Liberal in the sense of not being rigid, of not being cloistered, remaining in silos, but with open boundaries. There will be boundaries, but open boundaries or porous boundaries, and where there is give and take, there is continuous transaction taking place among the different knowledge systems.
Are we doing this in? Are we moving towards?
That's what we should move into, and it's a huge effort.
Yeah.
At least at the beginning, if we can start a multidisciplinary system where student choice and student interest are placed at the center, and where programs are geared towards creating an environment where the students feel free to move from discipline to discipline. And once that is there, it could probably evolve into something like this. It'll take time. But what is most required there is that the faculty will have to change themselves. They'll have to adapt, they'll have to transform themselves, they'll have to be very self-critical. So, not an easy task, but has to be done.
What is your assessment of the private universities in India? The new, we have so many private universities coming up. What do you think about them, and what are the basic administrative, academic differences in public and private universities? What can they learn from each other?
In India, we have had for a long time this very clear demarcation between the public and the private. And education throughout, especially higher education, has been considered the province of the public sector. And your government institutions or government aided institutions, supported institutions, very few private, even if you had private colleges or private institutions, they were part of the structure of public universities where they had to follow the same curriculum, the same syllabi, etc. Now there has been an opening up, and more private universities are coming up. On the level of principle, if you ask me, I would say it's a good thing. Due to two reasons. There is a great demand for higher education in India. And I don't suppose that the existing public universities, they're bursting at the seams in terms of student intake. The existing public institutions can actually cater to them, or they can, provide them that. So of course, we need more private people coming into education so that the requirements, the demands for education are met. Especially when you want to increase the gross enrollment ratio, the GER, as is the case with many governments, you need private players inside that. The second positive thing is also that private universities find it a lot easier to be more flexible, to come up with programs and courses and areas of research which are much more contemporary in nature, or much more aligned to what I would call the larger global higher education system. I don't know whether it's a global higher education system, but I'm sure it's to do with the Western educational system. So there's much more flexibility there. And that means that a lot of students are able to go into new kinds of programs and new areas of study, which they find rather difficult in the public universities. But on the other side, there is also a few issues that will have to be addressed. Especially because I understand that foreign universities from the West and other places, are on the verge of opening their campuses in India. At which point, there are a few questions that you will have to ask, and a few things that one may need to guarantee. One issue is, of course, that private universities cost much more than what it would cost to learn in a public university. Of course, the subsidized system is at work there. So, will it create a binary divide where the more affluent, the capable, get to go to the better private universities, and the not so affluent are destined to go to the public universities? That would be rather unfortunate, because it is not fair to the abilities of the students. It only caters to their monetary capabilities for that extent. I do understand that there are several private universities who've got systems of scholarships and other things which support students who cannot probably afford that. The other problem is that it could also create two tiers in terms of academics, where you have these fancy private universities offering extremely cutting edge, inverted commas, cutting edge programs, while the public universities continue with the conventional programs. That can again create another kind of hierarchy there. Now, I'm going to anticipate your next question. So what is the solution? Okay. Now, I would say that there should be some element of governmental checks and balances when it comes to private universities, especially in the fixing of fees, etc. Not in academic freedom, but especially in the fixing of fees, salaries, etc., etc. There should be some kind of a regulatory mechanism. I'm not saying, an oppressive mechanism, but some kind of a regulatory mechanism which can create some kind of a parity among different institutions. The second thing that would be required is, one of the problems within academics is that you will find that in most private universities, they have much greater focus upon technology, upon engineering, upon management, upon those areas of study which are higher up there in terms of the career scale, especially in a technology obsessed world as we are in right now. The natural casualty of that, of course, humanities and social sciences, but also pure sciences. Pure sciences gets thrown out the window. When we lose pure sciences, what we also lose is research in pure sciences, the creation of fundamental knowledge. And if that falls by the wayside, or if that is being done only by cash-strapped public universities who do not know where their next salary is going to come from, that will be a very unfortunate state. We will be short-selling our next generation entirely. We need engineers, we need doctors, we need technologists, we all do need that. We also need fundamental scientists in sciences, social sciences. What I mean is researchers and the humanities. So that lopsided system can be created. For that to be addressed, I would say that we can't possibly say that all private universities should offer humanities and social sciences and sciences. That's not possible. But I think the public universities have to be strengthened, and certain universities earmarked, notified as places of excellence for certain areas or certain domains. Not just earmarked as places of excellence. We have umpteen or hundreds of places of excellence these days everywhere. There are hardly any excellence there, because it ends in a nomenclature. But the kind of support that is required and the administrative rigmarole to be released from that administrative rigmarole, so that the money can actually be spent for academics. That is the answer. So regulatory mechanism on the one side and much greater strengthening of the public higher education system.
So I'm going to round off and come back to us, this place, this time. This is my last curiosity from you before I thank you profusely and end this session. So what has been your experience so far at Geetham here with us, with the place, with the conference?
You wouldn't let me say anything bad, will you?
I'm inviting criticism.
No, it was really it has been really delightful. Okay. It's a splendid conference, and the people here are so nice, very generous, very considerate actually. So I'm enjoying myself. And I believe that there are some exciting things in the offing here, especially coming as I do from humanities and social sciences. There are quite a few new ventures coming up. So all strength to them. Let them succeed, because it could, the kind of things that you're trying to do here could be models for other private universities too. In that, humanities and social sciences are valuable and worthwhile. So that way, all the best.